chain around my neck. Lead me anywhere. Let me be. Oh, let him be. Oh, teddy bear.
Hey guys, we're back with Chapter 2 of the Digimon Fanfic, Monkey Business. This one's going to be a little longer than the first one, this chapter, so I'm going to maybe try to split into 2 parts. And the author is Silvormoon, if you didn't watch the first video. I don't know why you would watch this if you... Never mind. Okay. Disclaimer. Digimon in general and Etemon and the Chosen Children in particular are the property of companies like Disney and Toy. Patch is my own creation. I wasn't aware Digimon belonged to Disney. A Gift Guitar by Silvormoon. The life of a Gazimon living on the bitmap desert was far from a life of ease and nobility. After all, they were the favored servants of Etemon, and his definition of favored was people who are allowed to do most of my work. Before he had come along, they had lived in small villages or colonies among the desert rocks, eking out their livelihood by hunting or, on occasion, waylaying any travelers foolish enough to get too close. Now they lived in style, sort of. Etemon had them stationed at every one of his strongholds, keeping watch over his territory and monitoring his network. Besides those, there was one small band who kept company with him. These most honored workers were allowed to travel with him as his entourage. Their duties consisted not only of monitoring the network, but also of keeping his trailers clean and in good working order, tending and feeding his Tyrannomon and Monochromon, making sure Etemon himself was well fed and comfortable, and otherwise obeying their master's whims. Most of the time, they were expected to keep out of his sight unless he needed them for something, keeping to themselves in a trailer dedicated for their own use the rest of the time. Only one was different. His name was Patch, and it was obvious at first glance that he was not your everyday Gazimon. Though he had the usual attributes of the breed, short gray fur, long floppy ears, sharp black claws, and a long tail, there were small but clear differences in his form. He stood a head shorter than his brethren, with oversized paws that never seemed to go where he told them, ears that fell over his eyes instead of standing up straight, and a tail that flopped and flipped of its own accord. Unlike most Gazimon, whose eyes burned a coppery orange-brown, his were blue. When he spoke, it was in a childlike, lisping voice. Most obviously, there was a ring of white fur around one eye, earning him his name. The differences weren't all physical. Most Gazimon were clever, crafty beasts, quick with lies and traps and insults. It was the reason why Etemon liked them so much. Patch was innocent to the point of naivety. Behind his back, many of the other Gazimon whispered that there was something wrong with him, saying that his data had been corrupted, calling him sport and mutant. Surely that was the only explanation for how a Gazimon could act in such an un-Gazimon-like fashion and still look so much like one. There might have been more than a twinge of jealousy behind such statements. Bewildering as it was for them, many of them had come to the conclusion that Patch was Etemon's special favorite. For some reason, a few months ago, Etemon had issued a decree that this peculiar specimen was, from that point on, to become his personal servant. He was expected to be at his side at all times, from helping him into his robe in the mornings to turning out the lights for him at night. Whenever Etemon walked anywhere, Patch was behind him, a small gray shadow. He was even allowed to take the leftovers from Etemon's meal after his master had his pick. How charming! Of course, not everyone saw all this as a privilege. It might just be that Etemon didn't trust the little creature to do anything without his own watchful eye on him. It was, after all, well known that Patch was a clumsy thing and a bit slow on the uptake. He needed someone to supervise him most of the time. Besides, who would want to spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, waiting hand and foot on Etemon? Apparently, Patch did. He did what was asked of him and never complained, seemingly quite happy with his job. The reason for his attitude might just have been, as his comrades said, because he was a bit simple-minded and didn't know if he was being treated badly or not. However, if anyone had bothered to ask him, he would have said only that he had a secret, something Etemon had told him never to tell anyone, far be it from Patch to disobey Etemon's orders. Right now, it was the quiet hour of the day. Lunch had been served and cleared away. It would be a while yet before it was time for Etemon's daily practice sessions. There were no problems that needed to be dealt with, and that meant Etemon had free time. When Etemon had free time, it meant that Patch was free as well. With both of them sequestered in Etemon's private trailer, there was no other Gazimon to see the strange activity Patch was engaged in. He was sitting in the middle of Etemon's stage with a guitar, much too large for him, resting in his lap. His claws ran over the strings and amazingly brought forth noise that bore a resemblance to music. "What do you think you're doing?" Etemon bellowed, glaring down at him. Patch cringed. Shall we? "Don't tell me sorry," Etemon snapped. "How many times do I have to tell you? That song is in the key of a B flat. B flat. Do you have sand in your ears or something?" "Sorry, Etemon-sama. Won't do it again." "Yeah, well, you better not. Now play it again and get it right this time." Patch obeyed, starting the song over. The music sounded more like music this time, and Etemon nodded in approval. For the last few weeks, he had, in deepest secret, been giving this strange little Digimon guitar lessons. Well, why shouldn't he? The Gazimon had wanted them so badly it was more trouble to not give them than otherwise. Besides, imitation was the sincerest form of flattery, and there was nothing Etemon liked better than being flattered. He never would have said as much, but in some ways he actually enjoyed teaching. He might not have been the greatest singer in the world, though anyone who said so to his face was either stupid or suicidal. But he could play the guitar. Music was the only thing other than himself that he had any interest in, and anything he couldn't do with a guitar probably wasn't worth learning. If someone wanted to spend hours a day letting him show off his awesome skills and knowledge, why argue? Especially when the would-be student was talented. Patch had a startlingly good memory when it came to music. He learned the chords in a matter of hours, and those long claws were built-in guitar picks. Not only that, but he practiced every spare moment he got. He'd never have the natural genius Etemon had, of course, but he still wasn't half bad. After all, with Etemon to teach him, how could he not be good? Patch finished his song and looked up expectantly. "Not bad," Etemon told him. "Really?" asked Patch. "Hey, don't get all excited. You aren't that good yet." "Shall we, Etemon-sama?" "Quit going sorry at me. It annoys me. You know that?" Etemon glared at him, and Patch cringed, expecting more insults. Instead, Etemon said, "That guitar is still too big for you." Patch shrugged. "Can't help it." "Yeah, well, it's a good thing I'm here, ain't I?" "I can. Come here, I want to show you something." Carefully, Patch set aside the guitar he'd been using, and then leaped to follow his master. shuffling on his oversized paws. Etemon led him to a storeroom full of odds and ends. Old parts of computers, broken sound equipment, spare cables, and other identifiable things, all packed into tumbled heaps of crates. The monkey hauled out a box and blew on it, puffing away what looked like years' worth of dust. Even with the dust, it was still easy to see it was a uniquely shaped box, and Patch guessed instantly what it must be. From within the case, Etemon produced a small electric guitar. It too was dusty, but through the dust, Patch could see it had been painted in bright colors and designs. Its strings were limp and untuned, and one was missing entirely. "Gift from one of my adoring fans," Etemon explained. "Never liked the tone on it. Too wimpy for a big star like me, know what I mean? It'll do for a runt like you, though. I'm tired of you putting your dirty paws all over my instruments, and I won't have to listen to you hitting wrong notes all the time." Patch's eyes lit up. "A present? For Patch? Patch can keep it?" "You can borrow it, yeah, here." He dropped the dusty artifact into Patch's hands. "Get it cleaned up, get it tuned, and prove to me you can take care of it. And maybe someday I'll let you keep it. But you gotta take good care of it. Don't you dare let it get broken or lose it, or I'll have your tail for my new guitar strap. Get it?" The little Gazimon nodded so hard it was a wonder his head didn't fall off. "Patch understands. He'll take good care of it. He'll polish it every day, twice a day, promise." "Yeah, well, you better. Now go get yourself some strings for that thing and clean it up. But clean mine first. All of them." "Yes, Etemon-shama. Right away, Etemon-shama." Patch scampered off, clutching the precious guitar to his chest, nearly tripping over his own feet in his eagerness to obey. Etemon stalked out of the room in a mildly uneasy mood. Generosity didn't come easily to him, even when it came to getting rid of something he didn't really want. The only reason he picked up that particular gift was because he liked the designs on it, and who was going to tell the ruler of this side of server that he couldn't have an instrument he didn't need and wasn't even going to play? It had turned out he didn't like the sound of it, and its size cramped his style, so he stowed it in the room to gather dust. After some thinking, he decided it was suitable enough that Patch got his rejected instrument. It was better than letting him borrow Etemon's own guitars, as he had in the past. Patch would take care of this one. As dedicated as the creature was, Etemon had no doubt that by tomorrow morning that instrument would be the cleanest guitar this side of the bandwidth ocean. Heading for his own quarters, Etemon peered into the room where his own guitars were kept, making sure that Patch hadn't decided to attend to his own new toy first. No, there he was, sitting in the middle of the floor with a collection of polishes and cleaning rags. Etemon's own favorite instrument was laying in his lap, and Patch was carefully turning its keys, plucking a string, listening a moment, and then repeating the process. Not only was he cleaning the other guitars, he was tuning them. Etemon nodded approval. All servants ought to obey so well. Of course, now there were no lessons to teach, and his normal way of dealing with boredom was cut off. He couldn't very well play his guitar if Patch was cleaning it up for him. Instead, he decided the best thing to do was pursue one of his other hobbies, making the other Gazimon miserable. He decided to go have a look at what they were doing and see if he couldn't think of a good reason to punish them for something. He hadn't hung anyone from the back of the trailer by their ears for a while. That was always good for a laugh. However, he had barely made it out the front door before his plans were replaced by something much less fun. A Gazimon the others called Broke Tail, souvenir of foolishly letting his tail get run over by a passing Monochromon, came dashing up to him, panting. "Etemon-sama," he barked, making a subservient bow. There's a transmission for you. Can't you tell them to go away? Etemon complained. This is the time for my practice session. Nobody ought to interrupt me when I'm supposed to be practicing. You're not practicing, Brooktail pointed out. Don't you take that tone of voice with me. I ought to stuff your tail in one ear and out the other, Etemon ranted. You go tell whoever's bugging me to go sit on a Togemon. Brooktail cringed. They said I was to bring you to them, Etemon-sama. They said if you didn't come, they'd take you to Paimon for insubordination. It's actually Piedmon, not Paimon, but Etemon swallowed the rest of his rant with an audible gulp. He could count on one hand the number of people he knew who would and could make a threat like that and still have fingers left over. And he didn't want to talk to any of them. On the other hand, they were all the kind of Digimon even he didn't dare cross without a good reason. Is that so? He said, trying to sound casual. Well, lucky for them, I'm not doing anything important right now. With that, he turned and began marching toward the control room, putting on a good show for the watching Gazimon. Inside, however, he was thinking rapidly. It was very seldom that any of Paimon's people ever bothered with Etemon. For the most part, they had a workable arrangement. Etemon never challenged their authority, and they let him rule undisturbed over his corner of server. However, it had been made abundantly clear that this situation would last only as long as Paimon thought it worth his while to keep the peace with Etemon. As far as he was concerned, Etemon could happily have left Paimon alone the rest of his life. He knew what the Dark Clown was all about, at least as much as anyone did. He had appeared eons ago, nobody knew how long, with designs to conquer and rule the digital world, and it looked like he was just smart enough and strong enough to do it. He had been carefully cultivating a following, drawing to him the other rulers of the world, bringing them in line with small bribes and big treats. Etemon had been convinced a long time ago of the benefits of leaving well enough alone, and so he struck a deal with Paimon, saying he would keep to his own patch of ground and obey if he was called, in return for being able to keep his own kingdom and a cut of the profits when Paimon was done with his conquering. I guess Paimon's a pirate now? So what do his people want with me, he wondered. I haven't done anything to them lately. I even invited them to my last concert. It's not my fault they couldn't come. He arrived at the control room. One of the computer screens was glowing softly in the otherwise unlit room, showing a shadow. Etemon crept nearer, trying to get a better look. Up close, he could see that the shadow had a face. It was humanoid, with aristocratic lines and a cool expression. Rather handsome, if you liked humanoids. Dark shapes, bats, flitted in the background. Etemon scowled. He didn't like Vamptamon. Vamptamon was the undisputed ruler of the other side of server. Most of the time he left Etemon alone, but the two of them were rivals when they were anything to each other. Vamptamon thought Etemon was hopelessly crude and uncultured. Etemon thought Vamptamon was snobbish, stick in the mud. Not to mention behind the times. He still liked classical music, for crying out loud. He also read books. Read them for fun. There was just no dealing with people like that. Fortunately, he didn't have to deal with him that often. The last time he'd been allowed to meet with Vamptamon socially, it had been at a party for some of the various dark beasties that inhabited the continent. Etemon had distinguished himself primarily by getting shamefully drunk and standing on a table trying to sing until someone had thrown him out. Etemon himself had no memory of the incident, only the knowledge that he'd never been allowed to meet the vampire lord face to face after that. Etemon shrugged it off and decided there was just no accounting for taste. From time to time, Etemon thought wistfully of getting rid of Vamptamon, but he doubted he ever would. Technically, the two of them were equals. They were of equal level, certainly, and both of them swore allegiance to Paimon, which should have put them at about equal rank. Etemon thought that if it came down to a contest of sheer physical strength, say arm wrestling, he would easily be the winner. The trouble was, Vamptamon didn't fight at the physical level. He had learned magic and strategy from those books he read, and since Etemon had never studied anything other than music and ways to make his life more enjoyable, he didn't stand a chance in all-out combat. Trying to get rid of him was probably a bad idea anyway. Vamptamon had always been open in his support of Paimon, and was consequently favored by him in ways that Etemon was not. Challenging him on any field might lead to complications Etemon was unprepared to deal with. He decided that for now it was best to go along with what the vampire lord wanted, provided it wasn't too much of an inconvenience. "What do you want?" Etemon demanded, scowling at the face in the screen. "I bear a message from our master," the dark figure replied in his cold voice. "Well, don't just stand there, spit it out already," Etemon snapped. "You're wasting my time." "I am certain your time is a valuable thing," answered the shadow mockingly. "Certainly I am aware of what long, difficult hours you put in. Since you are so clearly working yourself to exhaustion over there, Paimon has decided to give you a little diversion." Diversion? That didn't sound good. It was likely to turn out to be work, something he wasn't at all fond of. "Yes, it seems that a handful of human children have blundered onto Server, and are now wandering through the eastern edge of your territory. Paimon wants them disposed of." "Why don't you do it?" asked Etemon. Alright, I'm gonna split this video so it's not so long. So, part 3.